found outrageous cases of broken reality that will haunt you forever. I never should have opened that door. The moment my hand brushed against the cold metal, dread wrapped around me like a thick fog. My life was mundane. A regular Tuesday, coffee brewing, laundry piled high. Blinking pixels on the screen filling my day with the usual noise. But that door, it was different. My heart raced as I turned the handle, the noise echoing like a gunshot in the silence. The hallway stretched before me, dim and narrow. A chill crawled up my spine, the shadows flickering as if alive. I could smell the stale air, thick and heavy, almost moldy. It was wrong. Whispers seemed to twirl around me. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. They were speaking about me. Creaks broke the silence, slow, deliberate. My eyes darted to the walls, the dull paint peeling like dead skin. I strained my ears, trying to find the source. I grasped the edge of the doorway, knuckles white, as tonight's meal stirred uneasily in my stomach. Was it anxiety or something bigger? Something darker? The floor groaned underfoot, each step a reminder to turn back. I glanced over my shoulder. My safe haven now felt like a prison. I took a deep breath, swallowed hard. Panic tightened my chest like a vice. Something was in here with me. I could feel it. The scent of wet earth filled my nostrils. Something decayed lurking in corners unseen. Suddenly, a shadow moved quick, defiant. I froze. The air crackled, thick with expectation. Fear prickled my skin like a million tiny needles. I backpedaled, but the darkness loomed larger. I heard a soft laugh, unsettling and close. My heart thundered. Brightly lit memories of my life flashed, begging to be saved. And then it happened. A door slammed shut somewhere in the distance. My breath caught. I wasn't alone anymore. I spun around, pulse racing, straining to see the figure emerging from the shadows. A low growl rumbled, deep and resonant, thrumming through the walls, echoing in my chest. I should have never opened that door. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness twisted around me, the air tightening like a noose. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but I stood frozen, deriving a perverse sense of clarity from the terror enveloping me. Shadows whirled like a storm, flitting on the periphery of my vision. I squinted into the abyss, searching for the source of the growlous sound so primal, so filled with rage. It sent jolts of ice racing down my spine. Who's there? I called weakly, my voice a fragile wisp in the suffocating air, barely making it beyond my lips. The only response was the echoing hush of the corridor, mocking my feeble courage. A flicker of movement in the far corner put me on high alert. I turned just in time to glimpse a fleeting figure slinking into the shadows. Each pulse of my heart felt like a countdown. The laughter returned, more menacing, this Tamia chant of twisted glee echoing from impossible angles. I pressed my back against the wall, feeling the peeling paint grinding against my skin, grounding me momentarily in the deteriorating reality I once knew. I could hear faint scratchings, like claws against wood, and I knew the entity was close against the oppressive darkness. I spotted a faint glow at the far end of the hallway, a small ember flickering with desperate life. I had to reach it. It was a way out, or maybe a trick of the mind. Either way, curiosity pulled me toward it like a moth to a flame. Stepping away from the wall felt like stepping back into the void, but I couldn't let the darkness swallow me without a fight. With each hurried step, the growl turned into a raspy whisper, stalking me, circling like a predator. Stay, 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 it breathed, weaving through the air like smoke. I clenched my fists, either in defiance or fear. I couldn't tell. I stumbled forward, driven by a primitive need to escape. As I approached the flickering light, It broadened into the form of what seemed to be a Marora cracked, warped surface reflecting more than just my trembling frame. The image of my face stared back, but the eyes were different, a void, a cascade of blackness that oozed endless despair. I recoiled, crashing into the wall with bone-rattling force. "Look closer," the whisper commanded, and suddenly the air grew heavy with sadness, pooling around me like water. I could feel its weight pressing down, an invisible hand pinning me to the ground. "See what you've awakened." My pulse quickened as shapes began to emerge from the depths of the mirror, writhing just beyond the glass yet impossibly tangible. Faces contorted in agony stared back at me, mouths open wide in silent screams. They reached through the cracks, fingers gnawed and skeletal, begging for release. I staggered back, repulsed and yet horrified at the cry for help I couldn't respond to. The growl morphed into a resonant laughter that ricocheted through the chamber, enveloping me in its ghastly embrace. "You yearned for more than your mundane life, didn't you?" It taunted, the words laced with an ecstatic hunger. "Now you must confront the darkness you've invited." Just as the shadows lunged, a sharp crack split the air. The mirror exploded outward in a tumult of shards, sending jagged pieces hurtling through the air. Instinct took over, and I dove to the side, hitting the floor hard. As I covered my head to shield myself from the onslaught, I felt the darkness thicken, an intangible web closing tighter around me. I slipped into a haze of panic, struggling to breathe while the laughter crescendoed into a cacophony of cruel delight. The last thing I saw before fading into unconsciousness was a hand cold and splayed, emerging from the shadow near the doorway. It reached for me, and the laughter morphed. It warped into the familiar timbre of my voice, laced with terror and twisted delight. I felt the darkness pull me down, deeper into its depths, and in that fleeting moment, I choked out one final thought. Maybe I was never meant to escape. Then everything disappeared into pitch blackness. And in that silence, something began to stir. When I regained consciousness, the air was thick with dampness, and a damp, earthy scent filled my nostrils. The darkness had shifted, settling like a cloak over my entire being, and I felt disoriented, lost in an unreal world where everything seemed slightly askew. Groaning, I tried to sit up, but the weight of exhaustion pulled me back into the cold embrace of the floor beneath me. I opened my eyes, slowly adjusting to the muted light that flickered precariously from a single, guttering candle clamped on a wrought iron stand. The flame danced uneasily, casting erratic shadows that whispered and recoiled in sync with my pulse. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, my mind racing through hazy memories of the previous hours. The figure, the growls, the shattered mirror, it all felt like a nightmare from which I couldn't rouse. Clenching my fists, I pushed off the ground, rising to my feet unsteadily. A chill ran down my spine as I realized my surroundings had transformed. The corridor stretched before me, elongated and impossibly narrow, the walls pulsating like the walls of some creature's womb. The once familiar hallway had become a twisted tunnel, lined with thick shadows that seemed to writhe just out of reach. Whispers floated in the air, indistinct but hauntingly familiar. They curled and coiled, lacing themselves around me like vines. Help us," a chorus of ethereal voices beseeched, their tones agonized yet hopeful. I stumbled further into the corridor, knees trembling, conviction fighting against fear. The gravity of their words gripped my heart like barbed wire. Who were they? What had I awakened? Suddenly, the candle flickered violently, throwing a series of rapid shadows that danced like marionettes. I squinted, eyes racing across the shifting shapes, and could swear that I saw familiar faces among them. People I knew or had known before. My pulse quickened with recognition. Faces of friends, family, long-lost loved ones. They were twisted, distorted, and their mouths moved in a silent symphony of despair. "Please, find them," the lips of one figure mouthed, desperately pleading, but no sound accompanied the movement, leaving me feeling trapped in a muffled horror. "You have to stop it." "What?" I gasped, words barely forming in the constricted space of my throat. "Stop what? Who are you?" The shadows lurched forward, and suddenly the moans of countless souls echoed through the corridor, filling the air with an insufferable cacophony of grief and yearning. The voices swirled around me, each syllable amplifying the fear clawing at my insides. My breath came short and ragged as panic leapt into my chest. I felt an overwhelming urge to flee, but something held me in place, and then, from deeper within the shadows, an ominous figure stepped forth, one I had not seen before. A tall silhouette, draped in ethereal blackness, its form exuding an ancient decay. Hollow eyes stared, infinite and bottomless, and a crooked smile etched across its face sent shockwaves of dread rippling through my core. My body froze as its voice unfurled like poisoned tendrils, slicing through the oppressive air. "Welcome back," it crooned, the words dripping with malice. "You've disturbed our slumber, dear one, and now we all must play." "Who are you?" My voice choked out, barely louder than a whisper. It stepped closer, revealing grotesque features twisted with laughter and rage. "I am the consequence of your curiosity. You yearned for more than reality could offer, and now you will know the cost." I could feel the walls of the corridor vibrating, pulsing with a life of their own, and the candle flickered one last time before extinguishing, plunging me into darkness. My heartbeat hammered against my ribcage, echoing the chaos within as I instinctively stumbled backward into the cold, clammy hands of the shadows. "Find them." The chorus of voices rose again, growing in intensity as the figure dissolved into the encompassing blackness, leaving me alone with their haunting pleas. "Before it consumes you all." A bone-chilling realization sank into my bones. As I understood, I had to confront whatever lay ahead. I took a breath, and in the suffocating silence, realized I could no longer trust my own mind or determine what was real. Then I heard its scraping noises, faint but unmistakably, as if something was clawing its way toward me from the dark. My heart raced at the intuition that this was not merely a figment of fear but an impending, far more sinister presence. With a sudden, sharp sound, the shadows split before me, revealing a long-forgotten door, its handle rusted and taunting. I felt drawn to it, compelled, as though it might offer answers or freedom. But just as I reached out to grasp the handle, I caught a glimpse behind medarch forms merging, gathering in weight and number, their faces contorted in agony, and then, a single bone-chilling whisper sliced through the air, leaving me standing frozen with horror. "You will regret this choice." Before I could understand, the door creaked open under my trembling fingers, revealing a blinding light that blindsided me, and I felt the weight of despair crash over me once again. As the blinding light spilled into the corridor, I stepped forward, oblivious to the screams flooding my mind. Would I step into salvation or join the tortured souls clinging desperately to the edges of the dark? Then I realized, in that very moment, the voices wouldn't stop until I made a choice: either step ahead or step back into the void. One thing was certain: no matter what, I could never truly be free of the chilling grip of the darkness. In that terrifying instant, I could only wonder what awaited beyond the threshold. A scream erupted behind me, rising from the shadows, slicing through my certainty like a razor. "Help me!" I took a step forward, heart pounding furiously, teetering on the edge of the unknown. The light enveloped me like an ethereal shroud, blinding and blaring. Yet the anguished cries from the depths of the corridor pulled me back, gripping my consciousness with a relentless iron fist. I hesitated, heart racing as trepidation clawed at my insides, fighting to keep me tethered to the darkness that writhed behind me. I stepped into the light, feeling my body shift and twist through an unseen barrier. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world fell away, disassembling itself like glass shattering upon impact. In that brief, breathless second, I was unmade, only to be thrust into something wholly unnatural, a realm suspended in a canvas of thick fog and surreal landscapes. Before me stretched a vast expanse where the sky melded in hues that neither belonged to dawn nor dusk, painted with swirling shades of crimson and deep violet. The ground was a mirror, reflecting not just the landscape but glimpses of memories long buried, lost laughter, echoes of promises whispered in the dark. In the distance, twisted trees gnarled against the backdrop, their bark resembling tortured faces screaming silently into the void. I stood there, entranced, memories flooding my mind. Yet, the sensation was tainted by an overwhelming sense of wrongness. This beautiful deceit felt like a tomb disguised as a paradise, and I could almost hear the laughter mingled with sobbing. And then I saw them, figures appearing through the thick mist that enveloped me, not quite human nor wholly of this realm. Their forms twisted and bent, faces bearing the weight of anguish but also yearning. Once again, I recognized some of those faces from the corridor. Friends, family, haunting reflections trapped in their own surreal cycles. "Help us," one of them cried, reaching out with skeletal fingers, their voice a bittersweet melody tinged with madness. "We are not who we were. You must choose." Fear coursed through me like fire, yet I felt inexplicably drawn to them. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask them what they wanted from me, but the words collapsed like brittle leaves. Instead, I turned. The figures gripped the edges of their reality, faces twisted with imploring anguish as if they were aware of a fate worse than death. Each one beckoned, every reach crackling with desperation. "Trust us," another voice screamed, sharp and fragile. "Hell come!" A cold dread swept over me, the air thickening as the laughter returned, booming and rasping, swirling like a dark cloud overhead. I looked up, heart hammering, and saw Ida's shadow pierce the swirling mist, larger and more ominous than before. Its movement was predatory, slithering through the air with a sickening grace that paralyzed me. "Run! You must!" Before the figure could finish, its words were cut off by a cruel laugh that reverberated through every fiber of my being. The silhouette expanded, swallowing the light and laughter, absorbing the very essence of hope. I didn't wait to understand. Instinct took over. I felt like prey cornered by a ravenous predator. I fled, my feet pounding against the reflective ground, leaving ripples of memories that danced in my wake, chasing the echoes of my past. Yet, no matter how fast I ran, darkness surrounded me, closing in like a trap. The distorted cries of the figures clutched at my heart, urging me to return, to save them from the abyss. They were my loved ones, their torment felt like a weight pulling me back. "Stop! Please don't leave us!" Their voices crescendoed, merging into a cacophony that engulfed my consciousness, making me question my every step. Just as I thought I had escaped, I stumbled and fell, face first into a puddle that felt like black Lakita churning mass of lost souls. Slipping through my fingers, the figures morphed again, faces merging into hideous visages filled with sorrow and despair. A clawed shadow slinked forward, casting an oppressive gloom. "You think you can escape?" The voice hissed like a serpent, cold and devoid of emotion. Glimpsing its form was like staring into an abyss from which nothing returns. I could feel its presence as a weight on my chest, and I gasped for air. "Help us!" The chorus cried, resonating within the walls of my mind, rallying my guilt into a pulse. Desperate, I clawed to my feet and spun around, searching for an escape amidst the chaos. But the path was shrouded in terror, every direction offering only shadows of despair. "You need to choose," the voice hissed again, wrapping around me like chains. "Will you risk your peace for their pain?" My thoughts flew in a whirlpool of agony and uncertainty. I could only wonder what price awaited me beyond the shadows, what horrors rested in the heart of the darkness that sought to devour me whole. As the laughter grew louder, an overpowering surge of terror began to threaten my sanity. Pulsing in rhythm with the pounding in my chest, "Choose, dear one," it beckoned. "Join them or flee into oblivion." And as the shadows began to close in, I felt the floor beneath me shift, twisting and stretching like something in torment. My heart clawed in anticipation, and at that moment, I knew I had to confront the nightmare before me. Then, with a thunderous crack, the ground exploded, throwing me into the air. I plummeted down into a gaping chasm that had opened beneath me, spiraling into a darkness more profound than anything I could have imagined. As I fell deeper, a horrible realization dawned. Within the darkness, I could still hear their cries, each echo growing louder, desperate, insistent. "Help us before it's too late." The chasm widened, swallowing me whole as a shriek of terror escaped my lips, drowning in the depths of despair. The chasm enveloped me, an abyss of shadows and cold that devoured the last remnants of my sanity. I felt the weight of the darkness wrap around me, a tangible presence that forced the air from my lungs. The cries of those I had abandoned pulsed in my ears, each agonized plea for help striking like a hammer on the anvil of my guilt. They twisted into a cacophony of despair that intertwined with my own suffering, suffocating me as I hurtled further into the void. Suddenly, I crashed against something soft yet unsettling, an expanse of flesh that quivered and writhed beneath me. A grotesque sensation slithered across my skin, and as I pushed myself up in panic, the shadows began to recede, revealing my surroundings, a grotesque tapestry woven from nightmares past. Before me was a landscape of bodies, contorted and impossibly intertwined. They were not just forms of the figures I had seen before, but an entirely new horror. Faces I recognized, twisted in torment, and yet they seemed unaware of my presence. Ligaments stretched between them, forming bridges of agony, their mouths moving in wordless horror, their eyes locked in a lost expression, forever staring into an unreachable distance. I rose to my feet, heart pounding as a monstrous moan echoed through the air, a melody of suffering that resonated in the marrow of my bones. It seemed to thrum with a rhythm, drawing me toward what lay at the center, a pulsing mass, a beating heart of anguish surrounded by those remaining echoes of humanity, locked in their eternal prison. Then, it spoke in an all-encompassing whisper that slithered through my mind like oil, chilling my very identity. You long to save them, don't you? But can you bear the weight of their despair? Let them go, I shouted, voice hoarse, but my defiance felt like a mere flutter against a hurricane. A sacrifice must be made, the voice intoned, the collective wail of the trapped souls creating a symphony of agony beneath its command. To save them is to destroy your own essence. The ground trembled underfoot, and the bodies beneath me began to stir, their faces shifting into twisted masks of recognition. Please, they whispered in unison, their voices merging into a dissonance that crawled beneath my skin. Release us before it's too late. Panic clawed at my throat. The weight of their suffering bore down on me, a tangible force trying to drown me in the hollowness of their eyes. The heart at the center of this grotesque tableau throbbed with malevolence, coaxing me closer, promising answers. Even as it whispered of betrayal, I inched forward, heart racing, thoughts racing faster. What would it cost me? Who would I become if I dared to take that step? Yet, the urge to help was overwhelming, each heartbeat echoing the desperation of those I loved. Choose. The voice thundered suddenly, turning the remains of the landscape into a living nightmare. I staggered as the ground split apart, fissures of despair erupting around me, spilling currents of shadow that sought to drag me down. With sheer will, I focused on the faces around me, finding the clarity of recognition amid their twisted forms. I caught a glimpse of my sister, her visage marred yet familiar, and my heart tore at the sight. I will save you, I screamed, even as dread coiled tightly, constricting around my throat. Suddenly, the heart pulsated furiously, fusing the cries of the lost into a singular scream that erupted from the depths of my soul. I could feel threads connecting me with them, restrictive binds snaking across my very being. I was woven into the darkness, teetering precariously on the brink of surrender. You're one of us now, the voice intoned, its tone dripping with cruel satisfaction as the landscape echoed its promise. Share in our pain. Before I could recoil, I stumbled forward and the world shattered again, casting me into a new layer of this hellish reality. I landed atop a mound of rotting memories, and the anguish spilled out like viscous fluid, sprawling across the ground beneath me. Shadows danced at the periphery of my vision, sinister shapes coiling and weaving, whispering secrets that clawed at my resolve. I could feel their presence, could sense the entities lurking in the corners of this shattered reality, hungry for my despair, tantalizingly close. And then, I heard an unmistakable sound of laughter, sinister, mocking, echoing from shadows deeper still. It was familiar, a taunt from the very essence of my fears. As I prepared to confront whatever horror awaited, the walls of this grotesque world began to vibrate and pulse, glowing with an eerie, phosphorescent light. You've succumbed to the darkness, but will you succumb to the ultimate choice? It beckoned, eerily melodic. Then, with a rush, a shadow surged forward, and I recognized what it was. Not just one but many a procession of wraiths with outstretched hands, their spectral fingers reaching for me, their mouths forming a silent scream. "Join us!" Their collective cry harmonized, pressing against the fabric of reality like the tidal wave of a nightmare. The darkness is waiting. In that moment, I understood this was no mere choice but a reckoning of my soul. And as I stood there, straddling the fragile line between salvation and despair, I felt the heartbeat of the darkness synchronize with my own, an invitation to plunge deeper into the abyss. Then, without warning, the ground crackled and fissured beneath my feet, spiraling into endless void. I looked back at the desperate faces of my loved ones, their expressions urging me to save them as they too were dragged into the consuming darkness. I reached out, desperate, but even as I did so, I knew every step was tied to an unthinkable price. The last echo of their cries faded into silence as the abyss yawned before me, and just as I felt myself slipping once again into the depths, the shadow surged again, grasping me with an unyielding grip, whispering promises of eternal torment. And as the unending darkness enveloped me, I felt a chilling revelation wash over my soul. I had already made my choice, and the horrors that awaited were only a whisper away. The descent into the void was not the end but rather a grotesque beginning. With every inch I fell, the darkness around me shifted into a new real-man echoing corridor littered with the remnants of pain. Stale air filled my lungs, thick with the scent of decay and despair. Shadows stretched and pulsated along the walls, a grotesque choir swaying in rhythmic angst, urging me to embrace the guile that wove through this malevolent domain. As I stumbled forward, the corridor morphed into a hall of broken reflections. Mirrors lined the walls, but instead of reflections, they revealed fragmented scenes of anguish. My sister as a child, locked in a silent scream as hands, shadowy and claw-like, gripped her wrists, pulling her into an unseen abyss. In another, my closest friend lay motionless, eyes wide open, tears frozen in time. I fell to my knees, the weight of their despair crashing over me like waves of icy water. Each reflection seemed to draw breath, inhaling my sorrow, exhaling their own pain. "You cannot escape us," a voice hissed, ephemeral yet suffocating, flooding my senses. "We are the memories that haunt you, the shadows your heart has chosen to ignore." "Shut up," I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. My voice echoed back, 1,000-fold, drowning me in the distorted echoes of my own pleas. I bared my teeth, searching for any semblance of glory in defiance, but no answer came. Only laughter, the light, mocking and wicked, penetrated the void. Suddenly, one of the mirrors shimmered, a liquid surface swirling with colors that formed into images, pulling me closer. I dared not blink. I had to know. In the depths of that glass, a swirl of vibrant screams emerged, a charnel house of old friends and familiar faces, each one lifting their hands in a united supplication, tethered yet yearning for liberation. "Help us," they whispered, "before we become as one with the darkness." Their voices wrapped around my consciousness, a binding contract that seemed to promise hope but tasted of despair. Torn between my desire to save those I loved and the bitter realization that their cries could be nothing more than a net designed to draw me into deeper shadows, I staggered backward. From one corridor to another, unseen entities flitted past me, intangible yet painfully close, their forms obscured but their intent palpable. I felt them crawl under my skin, seeping into my thoughts, infusing my mind with dread. "Let them go," I hissed through clenched teeth, and the darkness recoiled for a heartbeat, as if pausing to consider my defiance. The mirrors sputtered, each reflecting a truth so hideous it rang out like the sounding of funeral bells. Every reflection burrowed deeper into my psyche, urging me to embrace despair, to claim brokenness as my own. Then, at the end of the hall, a door appeared, a heavy, wooden structure etched with crimson sigils, a tainted invitation pulsing with insidious energy. It creaked open slowly, revealing a room cloaked in shadows deep enough to swallow a soul whole. I hesitated on the threshold, a horrifying realization tugging at my heart. The space within was not empty but a Livia-haunted refuge layered with layers of sorrow, pulsating with a collective consciousness of all who had been lost. I could almost hear the resonating cries of those I had abandoned, echoing like a pitiless wind as I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me with a resonating finality, sealing me in this room thick with the weight of despair and silence. I turned, heart racing, though what met my gaze was not the darkness I expected but instead a tableau crafted from nightmares. In the room, figures writhed and contorted, suspended in eternal torment, a swirling mass of humanity that shifted and swayed, faces merging as if sculpted from the flesh of anguish. They turned toward me, eyes filled with the burning embers of lost hope, but their mouths moved not in desperation. All but one. From the center of this grotesque dance emerged a figure cloaked in shadows, mimicking the authentic gestures of those I loved. "Make the choice," it whispered, voice sweet as poison. "To save them is to embrace the darkness within you." And then, as if conjured from the depths of my heart's despair, I saw Hermie's sister, standing amidst the chaos, her visage serene yet suffocated by tears that refused to spill. "Please, it's not too late," she urged, her voice weaving through the thrumming torment. "Don't give in to the darkness." But before I could move, laugh echoed sharp, splintering even deeper into the recesses of my mind. The figures swarmed, pressing closer, their hands grasping for me, grasping for release. The shadows crashed against my resolve, invading my thoughts, whispering ever so softly until my internal battle became blinding. And then, from deep within the darkness, I heard Ida's low, guttural growl, reverberating against the bones of this terrible place. It surged through the air, freezing the swirling shadows in their torment, and all eyes turned toward that corner, where the darkness thickened, Ida's shape emerging, monstrous and incomprehensible. "You think they can be saved?" It snarled as darkness poured from the cracks in the walls, pooling at my feet like a living creature, writhing, inciting my deepest fears. "I'll do whatever it takes," I responded, desperation mingled with defiance. "I'll save them." But as I spoke, the ground beneath me tremored violently, and shadows bulged and congealed, looming larger, encompassing everything in a thick veil of despair. The figure of my sister screamed, her voice piercing through the crescendo of chaos. "No!" In that agonizing moment, I understood I was the last tether to their existence. I was their anchor, and if I chose to sever that thread, I would unbind them into nothingness. That I closed my eyes, contemplating the depths of the choice laid before me, wondering just how much I was willing to sacrifice, when suddenly, a thundering crack split the air, an echo of churning forces beyond comprehension, and then darkness swallowed me whole again. As darkness enveloped me anew, the agonizing weight of despair twisted and turned, throwing me into a spiraling void where understanding slipped through my fingers like grains of sand. The wailing of the lost echoed as a choir of madness, a symphony of anguish that wrapped around me, its haunting refrain beckoning me closer to an abyss so deep it threatened to consume my very essence. The sensation of falling ceased, replaced with an unsettling stillness. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on cold, hard ground, disoriented but alert. A chill danced across my skin, igniting every nerve ending as if the air itself were imbued with sorrow. Slowly, I pushed myself upright and scanned my surroundings. I was in a cathedral of despair, an immense space bathed in shadows, illuminated only by a sickly, flickering light that descended from a ceiling clotted with blackened dust. Crumbling stained glass windows loomed overhead, each pane depicting horrific scenes of damning silencia, tapestry of the tortured souls I had seen in the mirrors. Their eyes, painted in eternal agony, seemed to silently plead, waiting for me to understand the price of freedom. I staggered to my feet, heart hammering as the air thickened, pressing against me like an invisible force. "Where are you?" I screamed into the hollow darkness, desperation bubbling in my chest, demanding an answer that never came. Instead, I heard whispers, the rancid breath of the condemned flickering through the air like fireflies lost in the twilight. "Join us," they chanted, voices weaving together in a twisted harmony. Each syllable stretched and contorted, a pulse of raw terror that swirled around me. "Never leave, forever bound." Just ahead, something shifted in the ominous shadows. A skittering form unfurled, threads of darkness wrapping around it like a cloak, and I instinctively stepped back, only to find an eerily familiar shape stepping from the gloom. It was the figure of my sister, but twisted, her features grotesque and elongated, a cruel parody of the younger girl I once knew. Her mouth split into a grin, revealing teeth all too sharp, glinting in the pale light. "Why did you come here? Don't you understand? I can't be saved," she cooed, voice laced with discordant sweetness. "Join me, brother. Embrace who we are." "Stop," I shouted, anger swelling within me. "You're not her. You're not real." In response, she lunged forward, fingers stretching as if to consume me whole, a shroud of dark energy enveloping her. The room seemed to tremble, and an unseen force pressured the boundaries of reality, distorting everything around us until my world felt like a fragile membrane poised to shatter. I could see the other souls through the translucent walls of her malignancy, twisting as if caught in a hurricane of despair. But there was something else, a flicker of consciousness within the storm, a blend of memory and hope rising from the depth of the nightmare. I grabbed hold of it fiercely, trying to anchor myself to sanity. I felt it was my sister, or what remained of her. "Fight it," I pleaded, reaching out, despite the slimy tendrils of despair that wrapped around my arms to pull me toward the darkness. She commanded. "You're stronger than this." "Oh, you poor fool." Her laughter resonated with darkness, pulling back as shadows recoiled and shrank for a fleeting instant. "You think you can save me? I am the keeper of this realm now. Accept it, surrender to the truth, and together we can be free." Her words reverberated inside me, tumultuous waves crashing against a crumbling shore. I could feel my resolve wavering against the weight of her torment, catching glimpses of that innocent girl once more, trapped beneath layers of anguish. Would the remnants of her hope be enough to overcome the tide of despair enveloping us both? With a surge, I ripped free from the binding shadows, the darkness screeching in rage as I lunged forward, grasping her hand. "You're not lost. We can fight them together." Suddenly, the walls of our hell moaned as if writhing in pain. The room split apart, shadows collapsing inward, crashing around us in a vortex of malice. All the while the figure of my sister flickered, wavers growing ever stronger. "No," she cried, terror seeping into her voice as if the darkness realized its hold was slipping, the chaotic energy pushing against the very fabric of this nightmare. "You must make a choice." But before she could finish her plea, a piercing howl tore through the air, resonating deep in my bones, morphing the darkness around us into something darker, something alive. It coalesced into a towering figure of night, its eyes like hollow voids that swallowed light. "What is a bond of blood when pitted against the hunger of eternity?" It growled, voice skittering across the surface of my mind. "Choose or witness her become one of us." Just as time fractured, the world bending under the weight of impossible choice, I felt the abyss yawning wide beneath my feet. I could sense the pull of darkness and the flickering hope that draped over my sister, like the last vestiges of a dying star. The reckoning lay before me, a decision lodged deep in my heart. And then, with a heart-stopping thud, the ground erupted as shadows burst forth, an otherworldly scream filling the space. The walls around began to buckle, and as a horrifying realization washed over me, I saw my sister, her face once again serene, trapped between dimensions. "Brother," she whispered, and before I could react, a blinding light engulfed us, a clash between light and shadow that shattered the fragile line between our worlds. And then, everything went dark. When consciousness began to creep back, it felt like an evanescent flame struggling against the oppressive darkness. I gasped, my lungs feeling the weight of 1,000 memories drowning me, each one a separate thread of agony as pain prickled through me. I was back on the cold ground, yet the chilling stillness felt different. The air was heavy, saturated with despair, and something shifted just at the edge of my perception. I blinked against the dimness, forcing my eyes to adjust, and panic clenched my chest. The cathedral had transformed. No longer was it a vast expanse of shadows and flickering light. Now it was a twisted maze of crumbling walls and grotesque statues of distorted figures, their faces contorted in eternal screams of suffering as I struggled to rise, I caught sight of the ground beneath me. Bone fragments jutted out like grotesque jolts of agony, fragments of lives long extinguished. With a shaky breath, I took in the abundance of strewn relics, remnants of the damned who had been bound here long before my arrival. Each shattered memory filled the air with a dense, cloying musk of decay. Is anyone here? I cried. The last word caught painfully in my throat. Silence settled in thick layers around me, clinging to my skin like a moth's disquieting embrace. Just when I thought it might consume me whole, I heard a whisper, soft and trembling, like the rustle of autumn leaves meandering on a grave. Help us! A shiver ran through me, and I turned, tracing the sound. The shadows seemed to pulse, responding to my presence, shaping into twisted outlines that writhed with desperation. I strained to peer closer, and within the shifting dark, I saw figures emerging, lost souls, their eyes hollow and mouths twisted into silent screams, bound by chains that connected them to the very walls of this nightmare. Why are you trapped? I stammered, feeling the connection wrap around my heart like a tree's gnarled roots. The figures wept, their silent cries echoing in my chest. Help us or join us, they murmured, their voices fusing into a chorus of despair. Panic surged as I felt the tendrils of doubt slither back to me, reminding me of my sister, the decision forcing its way through my mind. Suddenly, a sharp crack pierced the silent veil, and I jolted, heart racing. A shadow shifted among the souls, growing larger, more defined, revealing a face I knew too well, though marred and twisted beyond recognition. It wasn't my sister. It was her mirror, another twisted manifestation that pulsed with dark energy. Oh, you wish to save them? It hissed, its voice slithering like oil across my mind. Or perhaps you wish to join their parade of anguish. It's a beautiful existence, you know, never alone, forever fed by despair. No, I shouted, yet the words tasted like ash as they fell from my lips. The haunting visions clouded my mind, a rush of swirling images depicting 1,000 fates worse than death, the succumbing whispers of the damned skimming the surface of my sanity. Enticing and chilling. The entity's head tilted, a mirthless grin stretching unnaturally wide. You will choose one way or another. The air crackled, thickening with malice as I made to retreat, only to find the walls bending inward, the maze warping with insidious intent. Fingers of shadow reached for me, momentarily brushing my skin, sending a skittering chill up my spine. Desperation clawed at my throat. I turned to the lost souls, their forms flickering like dying fireflies, and I whispered, I will help you. But before I could take a single step toward them, the ground trembled violently, a rumble unfurling like an angry beast awakening from its slumber. Walls shifted, and the chains binding the lost souls rattled against their hollowed forms. They surged toward me, eyes alight with manic desperation, grasping for salvation. Oh, you see? The entity taunted, dark laughter echoing through the cavernous space. You shall bear witness to the fate that awaits those who choose unwisely. As the shadows lunged, I struggled to defend myself, feeling the echoes of despair thrum in my bones. Just then, the air bristled with electric tension, and an explosion of light erupted, a blinding force that fractured the darkness, illuminating the distorted cathedral for a brief moment. But the light dimmed as soon as it arrived, darkness clawing back with ferocity. The silhouette of a colossal figure took form, merging with the obscurity, and I suddenly became aware of a heartbeat rushing, echoing, pressing against my chest. Choose wisely, it thundered, voice booming like the clash of storms. For in this shattered reality, every strand of freedom is tethered to sacrifice. In the shadows, the moans of the lost grew louder, more desperate, clawing toward me as they spiraled into a tide of shadows, shrieking for one last chance at escape. With the figures grappling at my feet, the world teetered on the brink of unraveling. The stillness shattered, fracturing the very essence of reality around me, and I was caught lost in the cacophony of despair and the pulse of a decision that threatened to engulf me whole. It was then that I realized a chilling truth had settled deep within me. The choice I feared was already bloodying my hands. And just before the darkness collapsed again, I felt a whisper against my ear. You must save them or become like us. The shudder of inevitability gripped the ground beneath my feet as shadows erupted, dragging me away into the echoing maw of despair. The darkness clung to me like damp soil to a corpse, weighty and suffocating. In that stifling embrace, my senses sharpened, heightened by imminent dread. The cold ground beneath me trembled, threatening to become my grave as the cacophony of whispers cascaded from the figures around me. Their faces, mere reflections of horror, twisted and danced through the shadows, their mouths agape, forever frozen in a chorus of agony that echoed through the warped cathedral. "Eno, please," I gasped, desperate tears carving lines through the dirt and grime on my cheeks. "I will help you." But their gaze was devoid of hope, their hollowed eyes flickering like dying embers against the impenetrable blackness. They lunged, not toward me, but toward something unseen, something that beckoned with a seductive siren's call. A tremor coursed through the ground, vibrating like a string plucked in a dread orchestra, signaling the arrival of worse horrors. An inky tendril erupted from the shadows and snaked around my wrist, its cold caress constricting tighter, like a noose preparing for execution. I fell to my knees, the pain burning through my flesh, and I found myself staring into the void where my soul was destined to succumb. It was then that I saw a looming figure that shared the heart of the darkness, obscured yet undeniable, flickering in and out of reality like a nightmare barely tethered to existence. "Choice," it murmured, its voice a blend of malevolence and despair, reverberating through the very fabric of my being. "Surrender, and I will elevate you above the filth of this existence, or resist, and join the multitude of lost souls. Let them go," I shouted, but my voice faltered, trembling against the weight of its despairing gravity. It leaned closer, the air thickening with putrid dread, and I felt the suffocating warmth of its breath on my neck, a noxious wind of humiliation and shame. "Every soul must know balance," it hissed, eyes glowing like dying stars emerging from the abyss. "One must be sacrificed to save another." The shadows writhed, a swirling vortex of agony and anger, pulling the souls back into their crippling embrace in a macabre dance of fate. Desperation gripped my heart like iron fingers, squeezing until my resolve cracked, and I felt that familiar overwhelming pull, like a lost child yearning for the comfort of a mother long gone. "And oh," I whispered. Yet again the words felt like stones lodged in my throat. The shadows shifted, morphing into images, flashes of my sister's face, smiling then distorted, lost and alone. I saw her begging, hand outstretched toward me, pleading amidst the swirling void. Before I could break free from my self-induced stupor, the creature struck an arm into the abyss, and the shrieks of the damned crescendo-ed voices rising like a symphony orchestrated by despair. Then, abhorrent figures emerged from the shadows, monstrous visages wreathed in wails, their forms bubbling with darkness, lured in by my fear. "Save them," the figure crooned seductively, wrapping around my heart with a slithering sensation that caressed my mind. "You must save them. Make the sacrifice, and the cycle shall break." With my heart racing, I stumbled forward, desperate to rescue my sister from the void that eons ago had swallowed her whole. "I'll do it," I screeched into the crepuscular air, feeling an unbearable weight settle on my shoulders as I followed the dark whisperings that flooded my psyche like poison. But suddenly, the shadows froze, tension in the air sharp enough to slice through my confidence. A relentless light pierced through the darkness, illuminating the misery trapped within. And in that flickering light, I saw the truth, the gathered souls bound in chains, their eyes bright with a mixture of horror and anticipation. Not just one, they whispered in unison, the words laced with a chilling truth. "You will need all of us to save your sister, but in doing so, you may doom us all." Before I could respond, the ground quaked again, the architecture of despair shifting violently as walls cascaded like a collapsing mountain. Blood-red energy crackled, erupting from deep within the abyss, sending shockwaves of chaotic power rippling through me. And I was caught in an avalanche of agonizing memories, all at once, a montage of lost loves, unfulfilled promises, and tragic endings clawing for release. A storm began to churn in the space around me, and I realized a rift had opened, a pulsating wound that revealed what lay beyond. It beckoned me, its brilliance marking the abyss with hope. Above the deafening wails and scattered cries, a final voice materialized, quieter than the rest yet saturated with despair that resonated in my soul. "Please don't leave me," It murmured, an echo that reached back through time. I cried out, my sister's words bouncing through my mind like thunder, the last vestige of breaking hope entangling itself with the looming shadows. And as the barrier between worlds faltered, a horrible realization struck me. The binding chains of broken reality now pulled tight around my throat. The choice hung in the air like a blade poised above my head. Save her, but in doing so, condemn all those lost souls. As the ground fissured beneath me, swallowing screams of despair and hope alike, I heard the crunch of something snapping behind Maya's shattering finality that caused my heart to seize. I whirled around just in time to meet with the visage of something unspeakable, emerging from the shadows with an unfathomable hunger that could consume worlds. And as it locked eyes with me, I understood this was only the beginning. I expected the darkness to swallow me whole, to wrap around my unwilling form and drag me down into the depths of despair. But as I stood on the precipice of choice, the fabric of reality began to unravel. The shadows contorted, twisting into a vortex that enveloped my body, drawing me sideways into the chilling void. Fear clouded my mind, its heavy weight pulling me down. But somehow, rather than plunging into the eternal silence I anticipated, I felt hands grasping mine, hot, desperate, alive. Don't give in, my sister's voice breathed through the swirling chaos. You're not alone. A flicker of warmth surged through my chest, igniting embers of hope, and for the first time, I saw her face among the hazy reflection of innocence suspended like a memory caught within a dream. She reached out, and instinctively, I took her hand. She pulled me closer, dragging me from the clutches of the void, the atmosphere swirling with echoes of the souls behind us. Help us, they whispered, their words entwined with the agony resonating in the air. Suddenly, the shadowed figure emerged from the darkness, larger and more feral than ever, a grotesque amalgamation of horrors that seemed to embody all the pain I carried in my heart. You cannot save them, its snarled voice laced with venom, an insult to the hopes surging in my veins. You will become one with this chaos. But I wouldn't relent, couldn't. I faced the grotesque creature, and with each word, I clutched hold of the flickering thread of light that danced in my heart. You're wrong. I will save them. I felt the room quiver in response, a convulsion of energy slamming through the suffering shadows that encircled us. The ground began to tremble violently, each heartbeat thrumming along with the resonance of my determination, the pulse of my truth. I took one step forward, then Anothermy's sister's hand was warm in mine, drawing strength from the memories we had forged. As I surged toward the nightmarish figure, contradictions waged war against my heart. The cries of the lost surged like ghosts entwined with the shadows, clamoring for acknowledgement. Join them, the monstrous silhouette bellowed, stretching its elongated limbs, a grotesque lure glistening with torment. They belong to the dark. No. With a fury that felt otherworldly, I summoned the memories of all those I had lost, the laughter of friends, the warmth of family, the weight of my sister's love. I remembered the way the sun would pierce the morning mist, how light and hope had once danced along my heartstrings. I could not let it all disappear. Then everything exploded, the fabric of reality folding back on itself, tugging me, ripping me between worlds. As the shadows recoiled with a collective howl, I raised my other hand, brandishing the light within me, a flame in the darkness. I choose to save, not only her, but all. Light burst forth as I broke through the anguish that enveloped me, washing over the lost souls who had woven themselves too tightly in despair. I could feel their stories, their cries, melding with mine into a fierce unity that transcended despair. Here, in the chasm of darkness, truth coalesced into a mighty wave. And then, one by one, the faces of the tortured souls emerged, familiar and misunderstood. They bore the reflection of their long-lost selves within the shadows. As they reached for me, something astonishing happened. They transformed, their ethereal forms twisting into brilliant flashes of color and light. Embracing their energies, the echoes of their pleas melded into something unspeakable. I had not just saved my sister. I had ignited a wildfire of hope, releasing the very souls the darkness had sought to consume. The shadows around us began to scream in agony, writhing and contorting as my light cascaded forth, dispelling the inky ink that bound them. And then, horror struck. A shadowy arm shot out, snaking through the ether like a monstrous serpent. I turned just in time to see the creature lunge, attempting to clutch me for one final grasp before the light engulfed it entirely. Just as it reached, everything, shattered fragments of darkness fracturing apart, scattering into a thin mist of memories banished forever. In that moment, as souls emerged fully restored, I understood this was not the end. I could feel the dark linger on the periphery, almost lovingly whispering that it was not truly vanquished, only postponed. The evil, fueled by desperation and despair, now fed off memories, waiting eagerly for that next crack in reality. But as I emerged, my sister beside me, she looked back over her shoulder. "We're not finished. We must watch over each other." I nodded. Somehow, the damage remained even as we were freed, shadows still lurking just out of sight, hungry and eager, waiting for the next moment of vulnerability. And so we left the cathedral behind, but as I stepped into the light, I felt the darkness thrumming, returning like a haunting lullaby. Because deep down, I knew I had opened a door that could never truly be closed. "You should never have awakened them," the dark whispers echoed in my mind, lingering like a chilling afterthought. "I wasn't the only one," I replied, shuddering as the ominous shadow of dread imprinted itself upon my heart. We had only made it through the door, and I could already feel the cold grasping at my ankles, a grim reminder that not everything had found its resolution. The darkness now knew my name, and it wouldn't forget.